The 2020 NFL season was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers' year. It was his second season to get more comfortable in Matt LaFleur's offense while the rest of the NFC North was in a weakened state. As the Vikings dealt with the loss of Pro Bowlers like Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter, while the Bears were forced to go back and forth at the quarterback position between a first-round bust and an injury-prone journeyman, and the Lions, it appeared that the Packers had struck gold for the first time in a long time. And fate being on number 12's side looked to be the case, as Rodgers put on an MVP caliber season, leading the Packers to the playoffs as the only NFC team with a first-round bye. In the divisional round, they outclassed the Rams in virtually every way, setting the stage for a heavyweight NFC Championship game against the quarterback with the most Super Bowl wins of all time. For years, the narrative for many Aaron Rodgers truthers had been that Brady was a system quarterback who benefited from having the best coach in football and stellar defenses to complement him. Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, was a one-man show who was responsible for any and all of the success that Green Bay achieved. Except Green Bay was dominant on both sides of the ball this season, leading the NFL in points per game on offense, while the defense was top 10 in giving up the fewest passing yards and total yards per game. Staring down a still effective but somewhat weakened Tom Brady, Rodgers could finally show the world that he deserved to be in the GOAT debate, even if he had less hardware adorning his fingers compared to some of his peers. The only problem was, things wouldn't go down like that. Like the rest of the world, I was stunned to see that Tampa Bay would end up being the first team to host a Super Bowl at their own stadium. When looking back at this game, one specific play has been widely discussed, and it was Aaron Rodgers' decision not to run for the end zone on 3rd and goal. This could have given the Packers a chance to go for 2 and tie the game, or at least bring them within a field goal. Instead, the Packers ended the drive still needing a touchdown to win the game. Many were confused, myself included, by Rodgers' decision making, and it made me wonder, did Rodgers stop believing in himself, and why? Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Rodgers is self-destructing before our very eyes. And I'm going to spend the rest of this video dissecting where he went wrong before prescribing him a cure.
Ain't shit to me, it's a walk in the park. Y'all too smart, can't talk from the heart. I got sauce and it's all for the charts.
Now, when I say Aaron Rodgers is self-destructing, it means we're on the brink of witnessing a collapse that's already been in the making, really since the first time that we were introduced to number 12. The beginning of his story is known all too well at this point, so I'll just give a brief refresher. Rodgers, a quarterback out of Cal, declared for the 2005 NFL Draft. The consensus at the time was that he and Alex Smith were the two best quarterbacks available. But what wasn't so clear was who should be taken first. In the end, Smith would be selected number 1 by the San Francisco 49ers, the team that Aaron Rodgers, who was from North California, rooted for as a child.
How disappointed are you that you will not be a 49er?
Not as disappointed as the 49ers will be that they didn't draft me.
Furthermore, the Niners offensive coordinator at the time was Mike McCarthy. Oh yeah, this is getting good. Despite the snub, Rodgers wouldn't end the night without a team as the Packers drafted him 23 picks later. But unlike the Niners, the Packers already had a really good quarterback in Brett Favre, and he wasn't too thrilled at the idea of grooming his successor. The book Gunslinger, a biography of Favre's life written by Jeff Pearlman, goes more in depth about the dynamic between the two. From day one, Favre made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with Rodgers, and always tried to ridicule him when given the opportunity. One example in the book was about how fan merchandise was often put on the locker room table for Packers players to sign, as it would usually be donated to charity. One day, Favre and his backup, Craig Now, thought it would be funny to take Rodgers' actual game helmet and put it on the table as if it were a replica. An unsuspecting Rodgers signed it, then proceeded to search the locker room for his actual helmet, not knowing it was the one he signed, until an equipment staffer finally handed him his helmet covered in ink. Rodgers tried to be a good soldier about it, but almost broke down in tears. Most importantly, many of Rodgers' teammates aligned themselves with Favre. Veterans like Donald Driver were rubbed the wrong way by Rodgers' eagerness in team meetings and celebrations on the practice field. His California cool kid attitude did not mesh well with his teammates and the middle America conservative ethos of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Teammates even went as far as speculating about his sexuality because he didn't brag about his sexual conquest and manhood in the locker room. This rocky start to his career laid the groundwork for much of Rodgers' later dysfunction. Before the 2008 season, after Favre threatened retirement 146 times, Green Bay would cut ties with the Wrangler jeans poster boy, and Rodgers was thrust into the spotlight, leading us into part 2, Rodgers' legacy. When trying to paint an accurate picture of an athlete's legacy, I find that one of the most accessible ways to do so is by comparing them to their peers. It's a method that even casual fans can follow along with. Oftentimes, Aaron Rodgers is compared to Tom Brady. However, in my opinion, the only thing they have in common is wearing the number 12. The only QB who comes close to sniffing Brady's legacy is Joe Montana. To me, a more suitable comparison for Rodgers would be Drew Brees. So let's start off by simply discussing their on-the-field achievements. Both men have won a ring along with taking home the Super Bowl MVP award with perennial Pro Bowl honors. Where Rodgers has Drew beat in terms of regular season MVP awards and making the 2010s All-Decade team, Brees makes up for it by leading the NFL in passing yards 7 times in his career, along with holding the all-time records for passing yards and completions. I think when both quarterbacks retire, the general sentiment from football fans will be that Drew Brees was one of the biggest overachievers to ever step foot on the gridiron, as he was able to overcome an almost career-ending injury in San Diego, only to end up signing with New Orleans, a city that was still recovering from Hurricane Katrina. All of that to go along with the fact that he was undersized and lacked premier arm strength. And yet, he brought the Saints a Lombardi trophy and at least kept them in playoff contention for the next decade. Remember how I just mentioned Rodgers' personality not being a fit for the city of Green Bay? It's almost as if Brees was custom made for New Orleans. A quarterback who most people had given up on found his only chance of redemption and revitalized his career in a city that was rebuilding and also needed someone to take a chance on them. Rodgers, on the other hand, especially with all of that God-given talent he was blessed with, will be looked at as one of the biggest what-ifs in NFL history. Yes, he's won a Super Bowl along with 2 MVPs and probably a third one very soon, but let's look at his accomplishments in the proper context. The road to his only Super Bowl win went through playing a Chicago Bears team in the NFC Championship Game that was stuck with Caleb Haney at quarterback, an undrafted QB who lasted 6 seasons in the NFL, starting less than a handful of games and ending his career with a stat line of 3 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. The Packers won this game by only 1 possession, by the way. Then in the actual big dance, he beat a solid Pittsburgh Steelers team, but this was also the year that Big Ben was suspended for a quarter of the season due to his sexual assault case. The following season, where Rodgers won his first MVP, the Packers went 15-1, only to get blown out in the divisional round by a 9-7 Giants team. The only team in NFL history to win 15 or more games in the regular season and fail to win a single playoff game. Since then, all Rodgers has done is lose his next 4 NFC Championship appearances, tying him with Donovan McNabb for the worst all-time record in that game. Another thing Brees does better than Rodgers is his leadership on and off the field. He's a family man first of all, with a wife and 4 children. And when it comes to his philanthropy, Drew Brees is a very vocal activist in his community, raising $35 million through his Brees Dream Foundation, an organization that was started to support cancer patients but expanded into helping rebuilding efforts from Hurricane Katrina by helping fund the restoration and rebuilding of academic facilities, parks, playgrounds, and after-school programs in the New Orleans area. He also donated $5 million of his own money to COVID-19 relief efforts in Louisiana. As for his on-the-field leadership, number 9 has always been the first one in the huddle, rallying his teammates before, during, and after games. Besides his comments on the anthem protests last summer, when have you ever seen Drew Brees' teammates throwing him under the bus? The biggest act of charity that Rodgers has done is also creating his own organization called It's Aaron, the purpose of which is to highlight other people and organizations who are changing the world with the web show where Aaron surprises and thanks the people who run these foundations. So rather than donating his own money or fundraising, he just posts about other people doing those things, which is still doing something. But number 1, nothing has been uploaded to the YouTube channel in over 5 years. And number 2, the website domain has now been reduced to simply a page on the other co-founder, Dave Gruber's website for his law practice. On the field, Aaron Rodgers' former leadership has always been to essentially let his play do the talking, epitomizing the saying that actions speak louder than words. His talent, rather than his personality, is supposed to be what makes his teammates gravitate towards him. In fact, I can't think of a single time where Aaron Rodgers has given a pregame speech or sideline pep talk to his teammates. When you're the face of the franchise and play the most important position on the field, you can get away with this behavior when you're winning, but as soon as the winning stops, your character will be called into question, and many of your teammates will not have your back. Within the locker room, Aaron Rodgers has struggled to develop a good rapport with his teammates and coaches since he entered the league. He went from the annoying and overzealous rookie to the cynical old man. For example, take a listen to this story from his teammate of 6 years, Greg Jennings.
Tell me the story.
So my last year in Green Bay, again, I'm contract year. I wanted to be in Green Bay.
You're a Pro Bowler.
It was I didn't want to leave. But our first game of the season, we're playing San Francisco, the 49ers in Lambeau. And it's a timeout. Carlos Rodgers, corner, comes up to me. He's playing with the 49ers. He's like, man, what's going on, man? Why aren't they getting you the ball? Why they got you running these little simple routes? And I'm like, I don't know, man. You know how I go. When you contract year, you don't know what's going on. Aaron is right here. He's kind of listening to the conversation. He says, you guys should get him after this year. You guys should try to get him. I look like, what? Like, this is the first game of the season. And my guy is already pretty much passed me along.
If I was Greg Jennings, after a comment like that, Aaron Rodgers would have been in my peripheral for the rest of the season. We have a business relationship as teammates, and that's where it ends. Jennings also revealed that Aaron Rodgers would frequently take shots at then Packers head coach Mike McCarthy, who was a part of the coaching staff that drafted Alex Smith over him. Describing it as a 13-year toxic relationship, neither of the two denied that their relationship suffered due to the draft night decision. As Rodgers admitted, he was humiliated watching his childhood team snub him on national TV. Aaron reportedly described McCarthy in private as having the lowest football IQ of any coach he had ever seen. The chemistry between the two got especially bad during the 2018 season. Fed up with the anemic and archaic offensive system that McCarthy was running, Rodgers broke the record for most throwaway incompletions in 2018, meaning balls that were purposely thrown to the ground or out of bounds. Many thought Rodgers was purposely quitting on plays to get McCarthy fired, and if that was the case, it worked. But it didn't do any favors for Rodgers' reputation of being hard to work with. Bleacher Report would also post a scathing expose of Rodgers' leadership, where mostly anonymous teammates took aim at number 12. However, former Packers tight end Jermichael Finley wasn't afraid to let it be known how he felt, calling Rodgers a sensitive guy who was quick to hold grudges with no apparent leadership qualities. The dynamic between the two was so bad that during the 2012 season, Mike McCarthy, who didn't get along with Aaron himself, had to force Rodgers and Finley to meet up at a hotel once a week for half an hour to work on their relationship. Probably the craziest part about this story is that despite Finley being the starting tight end, in 6 seasons the two never exchanged phone numbers. Just imagine how bad your relationship with another man must be for you two to be meeting at hotel rooms, and not having each other's phone numbers is virtually impossible unless you hate each other's guts. There are way too many nuances in an NFL offense to not be discussing the playbook with one of your pass catchers outside of practicing games. Also, real quick, I'm so tired of the Rodgers has no weapons narrative. This guy at one point had Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, James Jones, and Jermichael Finley at the same time. Now he has Devontae Adams, who is arguably better than any of those guys, to go along with Aaron Jones and Robert Tonyan. At this point, it's disrespectful to the hard work these professionals put in to keep saying that. But back to the topic at hand, this same expose briefly touched upon the estranged relationship Rodgers has with his family. Things were so bad that his girlfriend at the time, Olivia Munn, helped him plan out a conversation to start the process of reconciliation with his parents and siblings. She claimed the reunion went well, with Rodgers' family even attending a few Packers games, only for things to sour between them again. Flash forward a couple of years to the California wildfires of 2018, where Aaron would post a video asking his followers to donate whatever they could to help the relief efforts. That's when his brother Jordan put him on blast for not checking on their mother, who was home alone in the same radius that the fires were, as she was forced to evacuate. Awkward. As for Olivia Munn, she and Aaron would end things. Shortly thereafter, she put an anonymous ex on blast during a SiriusXM radio interview, who the internet was able to conclude was Rodgers. She described him as abusive, making her feel empty and unsatisfied with some of her accomplishments, such as successfully selling 2 of her TV shows to be produced. In another interview, she shared her experience of dating a man who she believes in retrospect was not attracted to women, who people also believed was Rodgers. So whether it's his teammates, coaches, girlfriend, or family, Aaron can't seem to get along with anybody. So what does it all mean? What point have I been trying to make?
I'll never forget, in another interview, he said, after he won his first Super Bowl, is that all there is? Is that all there is?
Is that all there is?
Aaron Rodgers has been dealing with a lifelong existential crisis. What he is lacking is the ability to buy into his surroundings and put his faith into someone or something. And I believe this stems from a core belief he holds that he is simply not good enough. When looking at what he's had to deal with, can you really blame him? First, on draft night, his childhood team passes up on the opportunity to draft him. Then he goes to Green Bay, where his head coach had been one of the main men in charge of San Francisco's decision not to select him. So he's on the Packers, where he's the backup to a guy who wants nothing to do with him and tried to make his life a living hell. He's in a city that has the complete opposite DNA of his personality. Playing quarterback, a position where one is expected to be a vocal leader, and that is clearly not who he is. Despite being uber talented, he has to deal with comparisons to Tom Brady, who has set an unrealistic benchmark for greatness with the most rings of any player in NFL history. Rodgers has virtually zero relationship with his family. I mean, imagine seeing your family celebrating Christmas and living their lives as if you don't exist. At 37, he's not married and has no children. He doesn't seem to have any super close relationships with any of his teammates either. Sure, you might see him taking goofy selfies with Aaron Jones after a win, but do you think those guys are hanging out in the off-season unless they're working out together? Look at the other quarterbacks from this past round of the playoffs. Mahomes and Kelsey partied non-stop after Mahomes got his big contract extension. In New England, Brady was attached at the hip with Gronk and Edelman. He's the reason Antonio Brown got his second chance in the NFL, even inviting AB to stay at his home, while Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs have the slickest handshake in the NFL. And with Green Bay drafting another quarterback in last year's draft to be his eventual replacement, things have come full circle for Rodgers. But is there more? I think possibly the biggest roadblock that Rodgers is facing is his sexuality. Now, when it comes to outing people, I think it is morally wrong. If someone wants their sexual preference to remain private, they should have that right. All I'm doing is basing this discussion off of things that have already been published. And I will not be giving my personal opinion on what I believe Aaron Rodgers actually gets up to behind closed doors. What I will say is that if the rumors are true, it could explain why he stopped believing in God and isn't close with his devout Christian family. When asked about Aaron, his brother Jordan stated, "Me and Aaron don't really have that much of a relationship. It's just kind of the way he's chosen to do his life. I chose to stay with my family and my parents and my brother." When he says he chose to stay with the rest of his family, that means at some point a line was drawn in the sand, with Aaron on one side and the rest of the Rodgers clan on the other, leaving Jordan to go with the rest of the group. Jordan would also say, "I can't imagine what it's like to be in his shoes and have the pressure he has and the demands from people that he has." In terms of pressure, it could explain why he dates women publicly, as he feels that he cannot let his secret get out, and therefore uses them as a smokescreen of sorts to throw off any suspicion from the general public. In a December 2019 podcast that Rodgers did with his now ex-girlfriend Danica Patrick, he states his reasoning for turning away from the church. I'll let the man speak for himself.
I don't know how you can believe in a God who wants to condemn most of the planet, to a fiery hell. Like, what type of loving, sensitive, omnipresent, omnipotent being wants to condemn most of his beautiful creation to a fiery hell at the end of all this.
My question for Aaron is, why would you be worried about a fiery hell unless you think you're one of the people who would be sent there? These comments would also drive an even further wedge between Aaron and his kinfolk. Sharing his same-sex attraction with the world would obviously be cause for pause due to how he'd be perceived by the media, fans, and in the locker room, especially considering he already has had a rocky rapport with many of his teammates in the past. However, keeping such a fundamental aspect of who you are a secret is never going to end well in the long term. And no, I'm not saying the only solution for Aaron is to become a Bible thumper like his family. But when you're going through life with no legitimate belief in a higher power, or at least the belief that we were put on this earth for a reason, you will struggle with having a void inside of you because it's hard to grasp what the purpose of your existence is. And that's when you find yourself not being satisfied with achieving anything, even a Super Bowl victory. The 2020 season would see Aaron Rodgers adopt a new Zen-centered spirituality. And on the surface, it appeared like it was working. For the first time, we saw a very joyful Aaron Rodgers, doing obscene touchdown celebrations, taking selfies in the snow, and making weekly appearances on the Pat McAfee show, like the one where he boasted about how his down years were career years for other quarterbacks. But then look at how quickly his new demeanor and attitude went out of the window when he and the Packers were beaten by the Bucs this past Sunday. All of a sudden, the old and grumpy Aaron Rodgers came back out of hiding as if he were masquerading as a content and happy person for the last 4 months. Now he was quote-unquote uncertain of his future as a Packer. The sad thing is, I think even Rodgers himself believed he had finally turned a corner with his mental health, not realizing that the Zen stuff was just a cheap fix. See, his Zen philosophy was centered around manifesting. Now, I'm not saying this stuff can't work for some people, but it goes back to the point I was making earlier about him not being able to buy into the world around him. This manifesting mentality often sends people like Aaron Rodgers who struggle with their identity down a rabbit hole of self-worship, as they try to overcompensate for their self-image issues by taking on a superiority complex, trying to convince themselves through manifesting how much individual willpower they possess, in hopes that eventually they may actually believe it. But this mindset often falls flat as soon as the practitioner does not get what they want, either due to failure or seeking out new goals every time they accomplish their current one, which is what we saw on Sunday. This is referred to as destination happiness, which is the notion of never being content with life in the present and thinking instead about the ifs, like if I get a new job I'll be happy, or if I lose 5 pounds I'll be happy, and so on. With that being said, things for Aaron Rodgers could turn out one of two ways going forward. The first being that he keeps going down this current path of dysfunction. He can keep trying out various trendy, new age spirituality belief systems as if they are fad diets. These belief systems that preach self-aggrandizement rather than self-improvement will keep Rodgers in a state of delusion and denial. Already single with no kids or relationship with his family, he will continue to isolate himself from everybody when things don't go his way. And now forced to work alongside with and develop the guy who was meant to take his job, he can either request a trade and or set up his understudy to fail like Brett Favre did to him many years ago. Do you think it's merely a coincidence that Rodgers and Favre were roughly the same age when they watched Green Bay draft their quarterback of the future? Or that Rodgers, who is an avid aficionado and collector of scotch, has also started toying around with tequila in the wake of Jordan Love's arrival? Substance abuse is usually where the empty and confused turn to when introspection and accountability are too tedious for them to start employing. Just ask Brett Favre, who single-handedly kickstarted our country's opioid epidemic. You know what they say after all. History repeats itself. Or, in a perfect world, Aaron Rodgers gets the wake-up call he needs. The best place for one to start is often in therapy. And how convenient is it that the National Football League now requires every team to keep a psychologist on staff? Speaking from personal experience, counseling has worked wonders for me. Rodgers needs to focus on accepting himself first, whatever that specifically means, is between him and his shrink. Repairing the relationship with his family should come next. If someone can't even get along with their own flesh and blood, who they're supposed to love unconditionally, there's little hope left for them to fare any better with their coworkers, friends, and romantic partners. Unless, of course, this family feud is over some bigoted beliefs. At 37 years old, Rodgers can use Brett Favre as a PSA for how not to handle himself in the twilight of his career. Hopefully, he gives Jordan Love the warm welcome he was never able to receive himself in Green Bay, for a peaceful transition of power. All of this so that next time Rodgers is sitting on a 3rd and goal, instead of passing the ball, he books it straight for the end zone, like only Aaron Rodgers can do, because
he's a bad man. Whoa!
See, Aaron, at least Stephen A. Smith will always love you. But in all seriousness, I will end on this note. I will never make videos on this channel where I bash athletes simply for the sake of it. No matter how harsh the message may sound when it comes to videos like this or the 3-part series that I did on Dwayne Haskins, I'm making these videos because I care, with the understanding that sports are simply a microcosm of life in general. Therefore, I want to give out my wisdom to anyone who needs it. It doesn't matter how old you are or where you are in life. For example, you could be an insurance salesman, a pre-med major, quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, or like me, a 20-year-old aspiring writer who is way in over his head with a MacBook, microphone, and a dream. There are people everywhere dealing with unstable relationships, never feeling like they fit in or can be themselves, who are struggling to find the fulfillment in this thing called life. It sounds cliche, but even if just one person can take something beneficial away from this video, it was worth it. This is CT, and I'm signing out.